Okay, hello everyone. Jennifer here with Coach Nick Davies, and we're so excited to have you on today. And I brought Nick on today because I met you a little over a year ago, and you did a mind scan assessment. I was finding the right word to go with that with me, and I love the tool. And we're going to talk about that eventually. But what I loved about Nick is that he has been on a journey. And I've been kind of obsessed with this topic of change and the need to subject ourselves to different environments and different experiences in order for us to facilitate change. And so Nick is a coach with Pro Advisor. So he's an executive coach, does a phenomenal job with that. And I would introduce your story, but I actually want you to tell us your story, where you came from, the different nations you lived in, and the different roles that you've taken on in your career up until this point.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm excited to share today. And one of the things that often jumps out for me when you get asked to talk about your story, and I think we may have talked about this before, is that my initial resistance, right? And I always have to remind myself that, because I think my story it's not worth hearing. And that's true for everyone. I expect on some level people go, I don't want to share my story, but it doesn't have the much value for you because it's yours, right? It's just how it is. And so, but if you don't share, there's no one else can take any value from it. So it's just always leaning into that. But yeah, happy to share because of that, and because I know it's always great to dig in a little bit. Goodness, where should I start?
Well, I mean, again, I told, yeah, the last time we talked, I even told you, I'm like, what impressed me and what I loved about your story is the decisions that you made from, say, living in London. I think you were in London, but you're a part of the London Stock Exchange. And then you've moved to the Philippines, and then you moved to the US.
Yeah.
And then even within the US, you've moved more than one time. So I'd love for you to take us on a journey of, being in London, being in that role, and the things that were the catalysts for you to move to the Philippines and take on another position, what that did for you, and then the same thing for when you came over to the US.
Yeah. You mentioned it already, but I'm certainly a big believer that environment is one of the biggest indicators of change. If you put yourself in a certain environment and you want the thing that the environment does, the chances of you getting it grows exponentially. And I didn't know that through most of my journey, right? So obviously I've got the benefit of hindsight looking back at these things, because some of the things that I ruminate on, like, I just couldn't see. Obviously now you can see where the breadcrumbs were, you can't see them going forward. The start of it, my career was leaving high school at 16 and my dad saying, I think that you should go work in the city, right? So in London, there's like a square mile, which is the city of London, which is banking and insurance. Like, I think you should go there and we'll go to recruitment agencies and we'll just find a job. All right, whatever you say. I didn't want to do any more schooling. I just wanted to make some money. So like I fell into that. I just did the next thing that was in front of me. And the first opportunity was to be a runner in a stockbrokers, where you literally take a deal ticket that someone put in a tray, take it from one place, give it to another. And that was in the year 2000, just after tech boom. And so there was looking for lots of people. So there was no interview for this job. It was just like, show up, go do that. Didn't require much skill. Can you take things from one? It's like, yes, okay, I can do that. And then I did that for 4 years, and I went further on by going through the process of actually taking the orders, to doing some of the trading, to taking exams in terms of like the equivalent of the Series 7 in the US. It's called, well, it's changed names a few times in England. But then I got my first, so notice in that place, it was not really any of my intentional decisions. But so it's more around like the external push rather than my intentional decisions of getting to that next place. And so when the tech boom died down, or the bubble burst, they started to move things out of London, and I got made redundant the first time after about being there for about 4 years. So they moved some of the roles to different parts of England, and they offered me a job in a different part of England. I didn't want to take that. I wanted to stay in London. It was more like I didn't want that rather than what I was going towards. But then I bounced around 2 other banks until I started working for Deutsche Bank in 2004 or something. And I was 21 then. And I worked for Deutsche Bank for the longest time. And the first job I had there was so challenging that I remember getting to work in the morning at 7 o'clock and just having to go like nonstop crazy to get a certain report out. If I didn't get it out before the market opened, my day would just be washed away, right? And I worked from 7 until 6:37 at night, like nonstop. If you want to go to the bathroom, you rush ready to go to the bathroom, come back, and then did that for like 2 or 3 years, and then ran my first team when I was 23, I think, my first team, and that was kind of the story I normally tell, because that was interesting to me. How it was only a team of say 5 people, but they were all in their 30s, and I was in my early 20s. But why did I get that opportunity? That was interesting to me. And what was good to observe is that those people in that teams, that some of them they were all kind of around the same age, same sort of experience, and they would be doing tasks which weren't that challenging, but repetitive and impactful in terms of like urgency and monetary value. And some people will be able to just flow through with ease and enjoy it, get the result. Others will be like bumping along the way, get the result in the end, but the experience was different, and everyone else's around them's experience was different. So like, what was the difference between those 2 people? That is something for me to easily see now, look back, and my observation then. But at the time, I was just okay, why can't you do your job better? But that essentially started that.
Wow. So you went from London to the Philippines, correct?
Yeah. So as I was working in those teams, it got to 2007, 2008. Well, 2008, I guess. And then so the credit crisis happened, and it wasn't fun to be at work. I wasn't in a good place personally, and I met with a friend of mine. We were just like meeting for a cup of coffee at lunchtime, and he's like, "And this is terrible." It's probably like a Wednesday or something. He's like, "Oh, this isn't great. This isn't fun. Yeah, no fun for me either. Why don't we just leave? Why don't we just like quit our jobs and go traveling?" And I can't remember if I said it or he said it, but the other person went, "All right." And you know, it's half joking, half real. But within 3 months, we were on an airplane to Southeast Asia. And so it was more a case of, I don't want to be where I am.
Yeah.
Not,
Okay.
I want to go somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay.
So again, the intent, it wasn't intentional direction. It was more like, I'm trying to get away from the pain rather than going towards something.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't work, somewhere else might. So that was a lot of the catalyst for a lot of those decisions. And so then we went traveling for 6-7 months all over the world. That was really intriguing, right? Because that's the first time I'd ever been away from anything for a long time. And it reset everything. And so by the time I got back from that, I didn't really care where I was. I knew that I didn't really need anything. It's just me at the time. I was single. And I remember coming back to meet my old boss like a couple of days after we got home. And I said, "Hey, what's going on? You know, by the way, I'd like a job, please, because I've spent my money." And so again, it was a necessity of like, where do we want to go? So I'm glad you're back. He didn't really know whether I wanted to stick around because, you know, I was the guy that left and went traveling. But I didn't burn my bridges. And I said, "I want a job anywhere that's not London." So that was the request. And there was a couple of opportunities that came up. There was a couple of Asia things. There was a job in London that I didn't want, but that was on the cards. There was something in maybe even Russia or something like that. And the one that was fastest was Asia, which I thought was going to be Hong Kong, but happened to be the Philippines.
Okay. So circumstantially, right, you ended up in some pain and then went off, got some clarity. I'm a huge proponent of travel, go to another place for a while, clear your head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Come back, reset. You know what you want, what you don't want.
Yeah.
And then there was an open door for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And then So my thought, okay, well, I'll go to the Philippines. I never actually been. I've done a bunch of traveling in Asia. I never actually went to the Philippines. Okay, so I went over there. They sent me over there for a week. I spent a few days there. I was like, okay, this feels suitably uncomfortable. And at the time, because I'd just been traveling, it felt uncomfortable, but still normal to be uncomfortable in that way. And that was really my experience. My goal was to get my career back on track, and then just work out. Like I'd spent a long time traveling, so I wasn't in the best shape. I didn't feel good about myself. I wanted to get back working out. I wanted to just work. It's like, great. I don't know anyone here. It's just me on my own. They pay me plenty of money as it works to live in a third world country, and that's what I'll do. And I did. I used to work out in the morning. I used to go to work. I used to come and it's great because I got to drive to work as well. I didn't have to get on the train. And Jen, miserable. I was miserable. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. I was miserable.
So talk about that a little bit. Why were you miserable?
Turns out people interaction is pretty important.
Mm.
One of the big mistakes I made was not learning to speak Filipino. Tagalog is their language, although English is one of their official languages. So most people speak English, but I don't want to. So I would, and I didn't really take that in. I was like, oh, everyone speaks English, great. But they speak English to me, but to themselves they wouldn't. So anytime that you could communicate with people, but if you're working in a team, everyone's speaking a language you understand. That's really challenging to know what's going on. It's like you might as well not be there. There were days in the office where I come in the morning, sit at the end of my cubicle. I mean, the physical environment wasn't the best there to set up wise, but I'd go around to go see the team. Like there's only about 10 people in my team, like see how them, like see what they're doing, and like get bits and pieces of feedback. And I had good relationship with people that were in Hong Kong, but I could essentially go through my day and feel invisible. Go in come in and I could walk around, and because there's people like talking around me, I don't know whether they're not talking to me because they were speaking English. So that was just a really intriguing experience. Then go home and go, okay, oh, I feel like I had no interaction with everyone, yet I was around everyone today.
That's not an experience everybody has in their lifetime.
Right.
You know,
right.
You mentioned earlier about hindsight being 2020, but about how your environment helps produce a change, something around that area of topic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, simple examples of that. You know, if you want to give up drinking and you're hanging out in bars all the time, you know, you can do it, but it's going to be exponentially harder. You want to start working out and all you're doing is hanging out in gyms, like you're going to have a good leg to start. So for me, the version of that in the Philippines was the force of the change to actually ask myself what I wanted to go do. Because I thought I was doing the thing I wanted to do, except when I got it, it wasn't at all.
But isn't that the beauty of the journey, right? You
right.
set out in a direction, even if it's what you think that you want, and you realize in that, like, okay, this isn't exactly it.
Yeah.
Right.
And the crazy part of it is like, oh, I wish I knew that because I wouldn't have done that. But that's not what the journey is. You can't go straight to the end, because the journey, and it's a bit of a cliche, but it's cliche for cliche's reason. It's the journey is who you become along the way. So you can't go directly to the end because you aren't that person unless you go through the journey. So I would really think about this if you're listening and watching this as well, like parts of your life where you've gone, that was a mistake, or I regret that. To know that actually that was the journey. Like you couldn't be the person that you are now without that stuff, right? So everything happens for us, whether at the time it's enjoyable, pleasurable, you can say that it adds a lot of value. And so certainly for me, there was times in the Philippines I'm miserable, but I still knew that it will be valuable down the line, you know, even though a lot of time my other part of my head would be going, that's ridiculous, it's terrible. But knowing that, and the fact we're talking about it now, obviously it was.
So you were in pain. Ultimately, you were in some pain in London. that produced a catalyst for something. I mean, we all would rather not have to make a different decision because of pain, but a lot of times that's where we end up, you know, in some kind of discomfort or something, or dissatisfaction, you know, causing a catalyst for something else, another choice. But even in being in the Philippines, in that experience, like in hindsight now, looking back on that, like what are some of your key life lessons that you take away from that specific season?
Oh, there's tons, Jen. It put me on my personal development journey, which put us in this conversation right now. So when you're in an environment you can't run away from, meaning I only lived there for 2 years, right? Right now it doesn't seem like anything, but that was a long 2 years, and I'd made a commitment, right? I made a commitment to go there. It wasn't for a specific amount of time. Well, I guess it was a year. I guess the commitment was a year. But of course I could have quit. I could have gone somewhere else, but there was pain, but the pain of quitting was higher than the pain of staying. Right. So that equation, so, you know, I was really into martial arts then as well, and like lifting weights. And so I had some friends that lived in Australia. I was like, well, if I quit now, I can go stay with him, let's sleep on a couch, and I can go train Thai kickboxing every day. That sounds cool. But then I didn't see the next step. I was like, well, also I've been doing this for a long time. If I do that, then I'm done. Where do I go after that? So there was enough pain associated. There wasn't enough pleasure associated with the forward part. I couldn't see that. So I was forced into the pain, like, to create something better, right? To create a better story, to create a better outcome, end point, to really ask the question, okay, what is happiness about? What do I want here? You know what? Like, it's funny to say now, but at the time I asked myself a question, Jen, like, what's happiness? Because that's the question I was asking. Not what's purpose, or do I need purpose, or like what's meaningful. Those things were way down the line for me at the time. Happy was the thing I was like thinking about. What is it? How do you get it? I read a bunch of books, and I asked myself a question: if I could do whatever I wanted now, like I could do whatever I want, what would that be? And the best thing to come up with it was,
Let's hear it.
Go to Vegas with my friends and have a bunch of fun. I was like, that probably won't work. I'd be dead in 3 months or something. That was the best I could do.
Yeah, that's like temporary relief or something,
right?
You know,
it's
versus
all the pleasure, right?
Yeah.
No meaning, no purpose.
Yeah, versus an abiding happiness. Yeah.
But I'd literally never thought about it before.
Yeah.
And at least not with any conviction to think through the process. And I was in my mid-20s, and I'd never thought about what it is I actually want, and what that would actually look like at any given point in my life. And that's the best version. That's the best thing I can get to, right? Because everything had been the next thing. And I used to take pride in like taking opportunities, because one of the things that jumped me for a few different roles in my first London career was that I'd be willing to take on and do that role, which was 13 hours a day. Someone else didn't want to do it, because I like the uncertainty of it. I like the change of it. I like the challenge of it. I get bored really quickly. So that's great, right? Because you get like pushed into different things. So we go back to the mind scan, because I'm high practical thinking. I want to just take action and move forward. But I get bored quick, but it also stops you from spending the time to get deep as to what you really want, rather than just jumping from thing to thing.
Well, yeah, if you're turned on all the time and doing and reaching a goal or whatever it is, then yeah, you don't have, you unless you're wise enough to make space to stop and ask yourselves these questions, which I think is something, you know, you and I both want for people, you know, is stop, think about, you're like, I never thought about this until I was in my mid-20s. Listen, you know, there are people in their 40s and 50s who haven't actually stopped and thought about that conversation either, you know. So yeah, so it sounds like your circumstances also forced you into a situation where you were in enough discomfort or pain that you actually got to asking yourself those powerful questions.
Yeah, exactly. So the environment of that was useful because I couldn't just run away from it. And so, well, the runaway options weren't would cause me to was too much loss involved, right? So there's a loss aversion part of that. But I read a bunch of books and started, and I was like, what do I really know? What do I know about what I want? It's like, well, I wanted to live in America. And if you asked me why, I couldn't have told you. Seemed like the right thing to do. Seemed like the right place to live. Like all the places I traveled to, the only place I really wanted to come back to was America. And so I knew that there was the company I worked with, the bank I worked with, had locations here. And from that towards the end of that first year, it took me an entire whole other year to be able to campaign, to get the right people involved, to get a move to Florida, where I eventually moved to after a year. But it had to be strategic in that approach, stay in the pain of it. But it was super useful, right? Because there's so many concepts from that which I use to coach clients to every day.
Give us some of those.
Just so many for sure. But the first thing is just where I started was to really ask yourself what's important, what do you want? And it doesn't have to be, oh, this is everything I want. It just has to be something which you can pin to, which you can start to grow. I sometimes describe it as I was thinking about it being in your stomach, right? And so if it's just like empty, then there's nothing there. But you're not looking for this flame of passion. Like, I'm not passionate about anything. I've got no fire burning in me. It's like, well, you're not looking for a fire. You're just looking for a tiny little bit of light or a little spark, just something you can hold on to, like a thread. You're not looking for this big, huge, just this tiny little bit you can start to pull on a little bit. That's what you should be looking for. That's the biggest concept to start anything. And you just take action towards that and it starts to grow, right? And then have a plan, right? Like a client said to me this morning, it's like, I realized I've got to be patient and persistent. It's like, yeah, I've got to be patient. He's like, I've got to be patient because I don't quite, he's setting up his own, creating a brewery business in Virginia, and he's trying to find real estate right now. It's like this place that doesn't quite work, but I've got to be patient to know that it will happen. But I can't just be like, oh, well, it will happen. You've got to be active in your pursuit. And so you got to keep pushing the door. The door's not going to open by itself. So that's true, right? Because you don't do anything, nothing changes. So that's a huge one for me. And be bold.
Love it.
Most of the success, they say, is showing up, right? And when you really internalize that, it's amazing how much showing up you do. And sometimes that actually means asking for something. This is what I want. Most people aren't getting what they want, not because they can't or don't deserve it. It's because they're not asking. Because they haven't asked themselves to start. Because Jen, what happens if you ask people what they want generally? What do they do?
I don't know, or they don't have this sense of, it's usually they're in crisis mode when they get to me anyway. So I'm having to get them to come back down from that and start engaging in these conversations here. Like, what do I want? No, actually, what do you really want? I want the deeper, meaningful things.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And if they're in crisis mode, they're probably reactive to what they have right now. So what they want turns into, well, I don't want this.
Yeah. Yes. That's the easy thing. I know I don't want to do this, this, and this. I know. I started there myself. I'm like, I know what I don't want. I don't want this, this, and this, and this, and then going in and saying, I love the language that you used for the first thing that you said. It was like a light or a spark, and I sometimes equate that also with curiosity. Sometimes there's a curiosity or a wondering about something that people, because they don't, whatever the reason may be, it could be they don't trust themselves, they don't, any numerous factors. I don't think they deserve to be happy, or they have to do this and this and this and this instead, so they just kind of suppress that thing versus just saying, no, there's a natural curiosity about something that I want to explore. Or even my most recent example for me was Boston. I'm like, every time I came here, I felt alive. There was and that equates to kind of that light and that spark. There was something in me that just rose up in a different way. And yes, I felt myself being in transition anyway, but it was that thing, and I could have given myself 20 reasons why I shouldn't logically make this decision, but I had to go back to that thing in here. And for me, again, it was just a sense of life. Like I felt life, like a flourishing, like something would flourish and something would grow if I leaned into that. So yes, I'm with you that there doesn't need to be some big flame happening around something, but there are key indicators that you can be looking for that your attention is just drawn to. And sometimes it's like you just like this particular topic or thing, or a natural curiosity about America, or whatever that is. And rather than minimizing that, saying, wait a minute, that's something that that's unique to me in my experience or what I'm experiencing right now, and I should lean into that.
Yeah, absolutely. You stop looking for everything all at once, right? For me is the key message.
Yeah.
For me is how that felt, because I don't know what it is, because in my head it's like it's got to be everything at once, right? And it still pops up for me now. Like I still notice myself doing that pattern. I don't know where it came from, but is there for me, that sometimes I can't do anything because I need to know everything together. So like even though I'm that's why even though I'm high action and I lean that way, the reminder that it's a continuum, right? Like there's not a binary, that's how I am, that's how I'm not. Like it's dependent on the situation where you go.
Well, and I know, like, I actually have your strengths here too. Like, I know you've got that futuristic vision, and you're an executor, on top of it, which makes sense why you like to get things done. But, and I say that to say my strengths mix is a little bit different, but there's a similarity, I think, that's just crosses all people, right? Fear wants us to know everything that's going to happen in every step. Fear can emphasize that. Well, you can't do that until you know every single detail, or I can't take action until I know every single detail on what this looks like or what's going to happen. When in actuality, it goes back to what you're saying. It's the process and the journey. And I've had language around consistently for myself over the years that's been like, you don't have authority over a process you don't live out. And so that gave me permission in my own journey to say, okay, if I want to be a person who helps and serves others in a coaching capacity or in a service role like this, then I want to be the person who lives out my own process. And process looks like I don't know what the heck is going on sometimes, but that day to day, I'm making intentional steps towards something.
Exactly. And so it's just a continuous reminder, right? Like, where do you need to be? Because sometimes you need to do the big version of it, right? Like the art or the balance or the dance, the beautiful dance between going up to creating the best version of what that is and dreaming, and also doing the work. But you can't stay either of those all the time. You've got to know, and the art of it is figuring out what you need for you in each one of those.
Absolutely. Okay, so to wrap this up, the last couple of things you said were find the light, the spark, start to make a plan around whatever that specific topic is. How can I start to just be intentional about making some steps towards it, and be bold?
Yeah. And I would say as well that all comes together with be committed to your approach, because being bold and out there, but committed to your approach, because it's not going to be I should say committed to your outcome, flexible in your approach, because it's not going to be exactly as you expect. And if it's anything worth doing, it's going to take a decent amount of time.
Absolutely. Okay, well, listen, thank you for this. We'll have information on how to find Nick below in the description, and we'll look forward to having you on again soon in the future. And thank you for your awesome tips.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
We'll talk to you soon.